I want to ask you, Mr. Chamberlain, who is the junior senator from South Carolina right now?
That would be Tim Scott.
And, all right, I'll tell you what I said online. I said, hey, Grok, who is Tim Scott? And why do Democrats think he isn't black? And by the way, was Tim Scott elected because of a gerrymandered district drawn only to elect an African American?
No, he won statewide.
He won statewide. By the way, the Democrat position is you can only elect African Americans with a gerrymandered district. I will point out Burgess Owens, an African American, is elected in a majority white district in the state of Utah. He's a Republican. Byron Donalds, another African American, is elected in a majority white district in Florida. He is a Republican. John James, another African American, is elected in a majority white district in
Welcome
Michigan.
to the channel, Patriots. If you are tired of the mainstream media twisting the facts and you want a place that stands up for the U.S. Constitution, truth, and common sense, you have found your home. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and stick around, because we dismantle leftist narratives every single day. Right out of the gate, Senator Hirono starts repeating the same tired, decades-old Democrat talking points. She invokes Jim Crow-era tactics like literacy tests and counting jelly beans in a jar to fearmonger about today's common-sense election integrity laws. Then she goes after the SAVE Act, claiming it's disenfranchising, because it asks voters to show proof of citizenship. Think about that. The left is literally arguing that proving you are an American citizen to vote in an American election is a form of oppression. It's absurd, and it shows exactly where their priorities lie. This is where the video gets incredibly satisfying.
Late case, and they never did.
Thank you, Mr. Grum. I see my time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's absolutely no question that racial discrimination existed in our country, and in many places, people would argue that it still does. And so we had all kinds of ways to keep black people from voting. We had poll taxes, we had literacy tests, we had, I think some places even required them to count how many jelly beans were in a jar. All kinds of ways to keep black people from voting. This happened. I don't think anybody can deny that that was going on. And as far as I'm concerned, there is a pattern now of voter suppression going on in our country right now. And the Calais decision just plays into that by pretty much gutting the Voting Rights Act, which, by the way, was reaffirmed many times in a bipartisan way in acknowledging that this kind of racial discrimination occurred and that as a democratic country where everybody has an equal vote, that's not tolerable. But suddenly, it's A-OK, just because the Supreme Court says so. No, it's not the entire Supreme Court. It's a 63 majority, which I consider to be basically an out-of-control Supreme Court majority where there is a pattern of this kind of decisions out of this court. So just because this court says so doesn't mean I agree with them. So meanwhile, there is voter suppression going on. You have an attorney general who sued at least 29 states to get these states to turn over their voter rolls. Why? What does the Department of Justice, what does the executive branch want to do with all this voter information? Up to no good, I would say. And there's this huge push to pass the SAVE Act. It's more Save Trump Act. And what does that act do? It would require millions and millions, all of us who are registered to vote, suddenly we will have to show proof of citizenship, either through a birth certificate or a passport. Millions of people don't have either. Married people who take their partner's name will not have a name that matches their birth certificate. So what are they going to do? There are going to be millions of people who are not even going to register to vote. And you think Trump doesn't know that? Of course he does. That's why he wants the SAVE Act to be enacted. That's why the Republicans would like to see the SAVE Act enacted, because they know that millions of people will be literally disenfranchised by not even being able to allow to vote. And then with this regime, once you do vote, they will challenge your vote as they did in the last elections. So voter suppression is going on. It's very reminiscent to the kind of stuff that was going on that the Voting Rights Act was intended to address, to fix. And now you have a Supreme Court that says, oh, never mind all of that, never mind all of that history. And over 3 cases, they succeeded in gutting the Voting Rights Act. And don't tell me that the provisions of the Voting Rights Act still exist in a way that is pretty much unenforceable, because the racial gerrymandering is going to be okay unless the legislative body that does the gerrymandering says, oh, by the way, we intend to racially discriminate. Are you crazy? You think that state legislators are going to be that overt about it? Of course not. So you have a Voting Rights Act that you claim is still intact. Please, give me a break. I have a question for Mr. Cox. Last weekend, thousands of people, and apparently you were among them, gathered to protest the Supreme Court's gutting of the Voting Rights Act. The central locations for these protests were Montgomery and Selma, Alabama, and both significant sites in American civil rights history. Mr. Cox, can you put this current moment into historical context for us? For instance, why is this moment reminiscent of when the last Congressman, John Lewis, who many of us consider a friend and hero, led over 600 peaceful protesters across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama.
Thank you, Senator Hirono, for that question. I think it's reminiscent and reflects the fact that the Voting Rights Act was not given to us. It was not bestowed on us. It really came from the people. And the joke I'm sort of making is that Justice O'Connor used to say were more lawyers in D.C. than people. I think we sometimes feel that way in D.C. We're on the Hill. Lawyers are at the center of the universe, and that's just not true. If we're going to climb out of this destruction of the Voting Rights Act, the penultimate destruction of our democracy, is going to require the people. And quite frankly, we're being gaslit. We have a Supreme Court, we have allies of the Supreme Court and allies of the Calais case saying discrimination is over. Obviously not true. We have folks on the ground showing and discussing with us that law enforcement are at the polling places. We have folks not only confused, but being discriminated against right now. And I have to say that to ignore the fact that the people are demanding that Congress respond, that Congress restore the effects test that has been gutted and taken out by Calais would be a mistake, because folks understand and know what is happening outside in the real world. And they know, particularly black voters know, that they aren't going to return to the 1800s and what we all experienced, or our ancestors experienced, that led us to the Voting Rights Act in the first place.
There is so much more to say, but I fear my time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would point out that my colleague from Hawaii questions whether or not people would be overtly discriminatory in the words that they would say. I will just point out to the California mapmaker who said the number one thing he was focused on was creating a racially gerrymandered district. So people do say it. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a moment ago, our colleague Senator Hirono said there's a lot more to say, and indeed she's right. And in fact, I want to go back to her comments. She began by saying we have a long history of racial discrimination in this country. That's undoubtedly correct. And then she said, quote, we had poll taxes, we had literacy tests, we even had tests of how many jelly beans are in a jar. Mr. Chamberlain, when Senator Hirono says we had poll taxes, I want to ask you who we is, and in particular, what party was it that implemented poll taxes in the South?
I mean, I don't want to necessarily speak in every single case, but I'm pretty confident it was mostly the Democrats.
And what party was it that put literacy tests in place in the South?
Same answer, mostly the Democrats.
And what party was it that had tests like how many jelly beans are in a bottle?
The Democrats.
Tell me, what party were the founders of the Ku Klux Klan from?
I'm pretty sure that was the Democrats.
Indeed. In fact, Nathan Bedford Forrest, the founder of the Klan, was a delegate to the 1860 Democrat National Convention. What party wrote the Jim Crow laws in the South?
The Democrats.
And so on this side of the aisle were members of the Republican Party. Who was the first Republican president?
Abraham Lincoln.
The Republican Party was literally founded to oppose slavery. We came into existence because slavery was a grotesque evil, and it was President Lincoln, the first Republican president, who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, who won the Civil War, and that resulted in the freeing of the slaves and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. By the way, fast forward to the Civil Rights era. Bull Connor, one of the most noxiously racist politicians. What party was he from?
He was a Democrat.
The Democrats, for the entire history of their party, have been a party based on racial discrimination. They affirmatively embrace it. They support it. Let me ask you, Mr. Grime, is discriminating based on race consistent with the United States Constitution?
No.
What does the 14th Amendment say about discrimination based on race?
Well, it's prohibited.
What does the 15th Amendment say about discriminating based on race, and in particular drawing congressional lines and explicitly discriminating based on race?
It's prohibited.
Now, the Democrats are fond of telling this story that is, and I wish I could find a kinder way to say it, a flat-out lie. That without discriminating based on race, that no African Americans will be elected and no Hispanics will be elected. Indeed, there was one fellow online who was a vocal left-wing spokesperson who tweeted out, if I'm advising anybody to run for president, they sure as hell better have a solution to how you make sure that it's not another 100 years before another black person can represent South Carolina. So that's a typical Democrat statement, that we cannot elect a black person in South Carolina without discriminating based on race. I want to ask you, Mr. Chamberlain, who is the junior senator from South Carolina right now?
That would be Tim Scott.
And, all right, I'll tell you what I said online. I said, hey, Grok, who is Tim Scott? And why do Democrats think he isn't black? And by the way, was Tim Scott elected because of a gerrymandered district drawn only to elect an African American?
No, he won statewide.
He won statewide. By the way, the Democrat position is you can only elect African Americans with a gerrymandered district. I will point out Burgess Owens, an African American, is elected in a majority white district in the state of Utah. He's a Republican. Byron Donalds, another African American, is elected in the majority white district in Florida. He is a Republican. John James, another African American, is elected in the majority white district in Michigan. He is a Republican. And my own congressman, Wesley Hunt, who represents me in the House of Representatives, he is elected in the majority white district. He is a Republican. And yet, in the Democrats' world, you're not black if you're not a liberal Democrat. There is an arrogance to African American voters. By the way, they also have that same arrogance to Hispanic voters. They say you're not Hispanic if you're not a liberal Democrat. Well, I'll tell you, I am proud to be the first Hispanic ever elected to represent the state of Texas in the United States Senate. And Mr. Chamberlain, in my election in Texas, was I elected in a gerrymandered district that could only elect an Hispanic?
No, you were elected statewide.
Discrimination based on race is wrong. Final question. The Democrats are now clutching their pearls that seats drawn to elect liberal Democrats in the South are going to go away. You may get black Republicans instead. Indeed, in Tennessee, they're freaking out that a liberal white guy who's a Democrat is likely going to lose his seat to an African-American woman who's a Republican, and they say that's horrible racial oppression. My final question is this. If you look nationwide, which party has egregiously abused gerrymandering for decades? Both parties are guilty of it, but who has been the worst offender? And in particular, take New England. Take Massachusetts, take Connecticut, take Rhode Island, take Maine, take Vermont, take New Hampshire. How many Republicans are elected from all of New England in the House of Representatives?
I think the answer to that is zero.
Zero. They've drawn every district in a naked gerrymander, and yet they're very upset that their illegal pursuit of power has now been stopped by the Supreme Court that is enforcing the Constitution and prohibiting the racial gerrymandering and discrimination their party is built on.
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Padilla.
Mr. Chairman, part of personal privilege.
Sure.
I feel personally aggrieved to sit here and to be lectured by my colleague from Texas. And this reminds me of the time when he was first elected to the Senate and the Judiciary Committee had a hearing on gun
Incredibly
safety.
satisfying. Senator Ted Cruz steps up and delivers an absolute masterclass in historical truth. When Hirono complains about the history of poll taxes, literacy tests, and the Ku Klux Klan, Cruz stops the room and asks the legal experts a simple question. Which political party actually implemented those things? The answer, of course, is the Democrat Party. Cruz rightly reminds everyone that the Republican Party was founded explicitly to oppose the evil of slavery, and it was Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president, who freed the slaves. The left loves to project their own party's ugly history onto modern-day conservatives, and Cruz utterly dismantles it. The best part of Cruz's response is how he exposes the sheer arrogance of the modern left. Democrats love to claim that minoritized communities can only win elections if districts are racially gerrymandered for them. Cruz completely exposes this lie by listing highly successful black Republicans elected in majority white districts. Leaders like Tim Scott, Burgess Owens, Byron Donalds, John James, and Wesley Hunt. He also proudly notes that he was elected statewide as the first Hispanic senator from Texas without any racial gerrymandering. The Democrats' real fear isn't voter suppression. Their fear is that minority voters are realizing conservatism works for them, and the left is losing its grip on power. When you can't win on the facts, you resort to personal attacks. Unable to refute a single historical or legal point Cruz made, Senator Hirono completely melts down. She plays the victim, complains about being lectured, and tells Cruz to stop talking because he thinks he's the smartest person in the world. Cruz closes it out with an absolute mic drop moment, channel-checking her complaints by reminding her that he served with legendary liberal Senator Dianne Feinstein, and Hirono is no Dianne Feinstein. This clip perfectly encapsulates the current political landscape. One side relies on identity politics, emotional meltdowns, and historical revisionism. The other side, our side, stands on the Constitution, historical truth, and individual merit. If you appreciate leaders who aren't afraid to bring receipts and stand up to the leftist establishment, you belong right here. Welcome to the community. Make sure to check out our other videos, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep fighting for the truth.